I remember the nights when I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, feeling that quiet, gnawing frustration deep in my chest. I had prayed, sometimes fervently, sometimes silently whispered in moments of despair. I had worked, pouring every ounce of my strength and focus into long days and sleepless nights. I sacrificed small comforts, tightened my grip on my budget, turned away from distractions, and chased every opportunity that crossed my path. Yet, despite all that, the numbers on my bank statement barely budged. The bills piled up, the deadlines loomed, and every time I thought I was close to turning a corner, the same old struggles pushed me right back into that cycle of scarcity. There was an ache in me, a sense that something was wrong, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. I kept telling myself, I need more faith. If only I believed harder, prayed longer, trusted more fully. But no matter how much faith I summoned, my financial reality stayed stubbornly the same. It was like I was running on a treadmill, expending energy but not moving forward. Friends around me seemed to find breakthroughs, unexpected blessings, or sudden promotion, but I felt invisible to that kind of favor. There was a silence in my life that no amount of effort seemed to break. One evening, worn down by exhaustion and helplessness, I confessed this to God in a quiet room lit only by the soft glow of a single lamp. Why, God? Why does it feel like I'm knocking on a door that never opens? I believe, I work, I give thanks, yet I'm still stuck. It wasn't a question born of rebellion, it was a desperate plea from a heart that wanted to understand its own stumbling blocks. In that moment, a thought surfaced I hadn't fully acknowledged before. Maybe the problem wasn't the lack of faith, but something else entirely. Something quieter, more subtle. Something hidden beneath the surface of my prayers and efforts. It was an insight that felt like a paradox but also held a strange kind of truth, that I was, without realizing it, rejecting prosperity. I couldn't quite grasp it at first. Rejecting prosperity? That felt like a harsh accusation. After all, I didn't want to deny blessings or abundance. I had always respected humility, thoughtful living, and caution with money. I believed that clinging too tightly to wealth was wrong, that it could lead to pride or distraction from what truly mattered. I thought saying, money isn't the most important thing, was a noble way to keep myself grounded. But somewhere, deep down, a conflict was growing. I noticed that each time I dismissed money's importance, it was while stuck in debt or struggling financially. It was as if I was trying to convince myself that the very thing I was desperate for didn't really matter. I heard in my own voice a contradiction I had never named before. How could I say money wasn't important, while feeling the weight of its absence pressing on every day? That realization was uncomfortable. It's one thing to want to prosper, and another to unknowingly stand in the way of your own progress. It made me ask harder questions about my relationship with money, questions I hadn't dared to ask. Could my so-called humility actually be a shield? A way to keep something I wanted far enough away so I wouldn't have to face the responsibility or changes it required? Was I silently closing doors with my words and beliefs, even as I begged for them to open? This wasn't a story about greed or selfishness. It was a story of conflict, between what I had been taught about faith, humility, and working hard, and the reality of what prosperity actually looked like. I had been holding on to a mindset that, at its core, subtly rejected abundance without realizing it. This revelation shifted something within me, a crack in the wall of my old thinking. It opened a path toward understanding that perhaps my struggle wasn't a test of faith to endure, but a call to see my own role in these patterns. That prosperity was not a prize for a select few, nor a sign of moral failure, but something that could coexist with faith, humility, and responsibility. That it could be a tool, a resource, something meant to help me live fully and serve others, rather than a burden or temptation to avoid. I realize now that this isn't just my story. I see it in the stories around me, in the faces of those who pray for change but feel stuck. In our culture, we often hold contradictory beliefs about money, sometimes praising simplicity and humility, sometimes demonizing wealth, sometimes feeling guilty for wanting more. But these mixed messages create invisible blocks. They quietly separate our deepest desires from the actions and attitudes that could actually shift our realities. This journey I'm on feels like stepping into a conversation God has been waiting to have with us, not about how to want less, but about how to want rightly. It's about aligning faith with practical responsibility, with open hearts and willing hands. And it's about inviting us to see money not as a curse or a test, but as a tool placed in our lives for purpose and growth. So I'm here, ready to walk through this discovery together. Ready to challenge the attitudes that have kept us stuck and explore the mindset shifts that can set us free. I want us to confront the silent barriers one by one, not with shame or blame, but with honesty and compassion. Because I believe that on the other side of this understanding lies a new way to walk into abundance, with faith as our foundation, responsibility as our guide, and open hands ready to receive. What if the reason prosperity has felt unreachable is not because we lacked faith, but because we never saw the ways we might have been rejecting it all along? How would that change everything we thought we knew about growth, blessing, and purpose? I don't have all the answers yet, but I believe we can find them together. And I want to invite you to lean into that possibility with me. There was a day when I found myself alone on a park bench, the world rushing past in vibrant motion while my mind wrestled with a storm of conflicting emotions. I had always believed success required sacrifices, patience, and endurance. Yet, beneath those convictions, an almost invisible resistance was lurking, quietly draining my energy and clouding my decisions. The revelation hit me not in a flash but through a gradual dawning. I had been embodying a subtle form of self-denial disguised as virtue. I recall a conversation with an old mentor during that period. His voice was steady but probing as he asked, "What do you fear losing if abundance enters your life?" This question unsettled me because it unveiled a dimension of my struggle I hadn't confronted before. It was as though welcoming prosperity threatened an unseen sense of security, a comfort found in familiarity, even if that comfort came wrapped in stress and limitation. This fear revolved around responsibility, image, and identity. Over time, I realized how tightly I clung to the story of hardship as evidence of my authenticity and worthiness. Giving up the struggle felt like surrendering that sacred narrative. It was paradoxical. I yearned for breakthrough but feared the transformation it demanded. Like a seed unwilling to break its shell, I hampered my own growth by holding on to old definitions of self. Further complicating this was a hidden misconception about stewardship. I had equated managing money carefully with scarcity thinking, convinced that spending or even accessing resources freely might lead to loss or spiritual failure. The irony was painful. By trying to be cautious, I had erected invisible barriers that stifled creativity and flow. I now recognize how this mindset mirrored a well-worn habit of prioritizing restraint over trust, as if my discipline was a shield against disappointment rather than a bridge toward possibility. Moreover, I noticed my language around finances often contained unspoken judgments. Phrases like "I shouldn't want too much" or "it's better to live simply" were laced not with wisdom but with an undercurrent of fear. They shaped a mental script where prosperity felt reserved for others, while my rightful place was in the shadows of moderation and quiet sacrifice. It was like standing on the edge of a river, hesitant to cross, fearful the current might sweep me away. Yet the crossing was necessary to reach the other side, a place of empowerment and freedom. Looking back, one instance stands out vividly. A friend invited me to a seminar about financial confidence and its connection to spiritual abundance. I hesitated and declined, telling myself it wasn't a priority. In truth, my resistance was rooted in shame and uncertainty. The idea of stepping into a community that celebrated growth and wealth felt foreign and intimidating. I was afraid they would see through the facade of my supposed humility, exposing my hidden doubts and insecurities. On another occasion, I found myself avoiding opportunities that required investing money up front, even when I sensed they could foster new income streams. The internal dialogue was swift and ruthless. What if it doesn't pay off? What if I lose what little I have? It felt easier to settle for incremental progress than risk the possibility of failure. This pattern stealthily eroded ambition and anchored me to a state of perpetual hesitation. During hours of deep reflection, I realized these mental barricades were more than simple fears. They were manifestations of a broader disconnect between desire and belief. The heart wanted breakthrough, but the mind replayed old stories of unworthiness and limitation. Reconciling these conflicting parts called for radical honesty and gentle compassion. I had to invite these fears out from the shadows, naming them aloud and examining their roots without judgment. As this inner work unfolded, a transformation began. I noticed that embracing abundance requires courage to reimagine identity beyond hardship and struggle. It demands surrendering control not by clinging tighter to caution but by cultivating trust in the unfolding journey. I started to replace cautionary tales with affirmations of possibility, practicing statements like "I am worthy of increase" and "resources flow to me because they serve a greater purpose." This shift didn't erase old fears overnight, but it diminished their power. I began to accept invitations to learn and grow, even when the path was uncertain. I understood the necessity of stepping into environments that uplifted confidence and fostered shared prosperity. Each small decision to move beyond my comfort zones felt like a brick removed from the wall of limitation around me. Now, when I face moments of doubt or hesitation, I remind myself that the resistance isn't an enemy but a messenger. It signals areas ripe for healing and realignment. Instead of retreating, I lean into discomfort, knowing it often precedes breakthrough. This awareness transforms my approach, from avoidance to curiosity, from fear to trust. Imagine, for a moment, standing before a locked door that has guarded your fullest potential. The key isn't tucked away in distant dreams or external validation. It resides in the willingness to examine internal patterns and welcome change with open arms. The journey may feel uncertain, even risky, but it is through this passage that true abundance unfolds. I invite you to listen inwardly and identify any voices or beliefs that quietly persuade you to settle for less. What stories have you accepted as truths without challenge? And what might happen if you questioned their authority? Our stories are powerful, but they are not fixed. With intention and grace, we can rewrite the narratives surrounding prosperity, transforming whispered doubts into confident affirmations of our rightful place in abundance's flow. The door may still be locked today, but within reach lies the courage to turn the key and step through. I remember a morning when I sat across from an old friend at a small cafe, sunlight pooling like liquid gold through the window. We were deep in conversation, and she shared a story that struck a chord within me. She spoke about how she had long believed money was a source of stress, something to resist rather than invite. Yet, in a surprising turn, she described a day when she dared to think differently. Instead of pushing wealth away, she started imagining it as a loyal companion rather than a distant enemy. The shift in her energy was palpable, as though a heavy fog had lifted. Listening to her, I realized this was a new path I also needed to walk. Her words opened my eyes to a subtle but profound distinction: money itself holds no moral judgment, it carries the potential we breathe into it. For years, I treated money like a wild horse. I tried to either restrain it completely or keep a wary distance, convinced that both extremes would shield me from harm. This defensive stance, however, drained my vitality and limited my reach. Money, when entrusted wisely and purposefully, could become a servant rather than a master. My perspective was stuck in a cycle of misinterpretation, mistaking fear of loss for spiritual humility. Shortly afterward, during a community gathering, I witnessed a man speak candidly about his journey from financial scarcity to intentional abundance. He recounted how embracing accountability transformed his approach entirely. Instead of viewing finances as uncontrollable or fated, he took deliberate steps to understand where every dollar was going and why. This courage to face reality head-on, not with judgment, but with curiosity, unlocked new doors for him. I was fascinated by how responsibility was not a weight to bear but the foundation upon which freedom stands. This sparked a realization inside me: true faith doesn't absolve us from managing our affairs, it empowers us to steward them with wisdom. A profound disconnect emerges when spirituality is misread as passivity. Aligning belief with purposeful action requires a delicate dance. Faith becomes a catalyst, urging us to move boldly into habitats where growth can flourish rather than retreat into safety nets lined with excuses. An unforgettable example surfaced during a particularly challenging month, when unforeseen expenses threatened the little stability that existed. Instead of retreating into denial or frustration, I chose to list every area I could adjust and repair. While this felt daunting, I discovered a strange exhilaration in this act of confronting rather than avoiding. Owning my financial reality, flaws and all, became a gesture of respect toward the very resources I wished to nurture. It was as if clarity itself ignited a dormant flame in me. In these moments, I began journaling questions like, what gifts can I cultivate even amid limitation? How might embracing financial stewardship deepen my faith journey? This practice revealed layers of insight I hadn't anticipated. It illuminated how prosperity isn't merely about accumulation but about harmonizing mindset, heart, and habit. Prosperity becomes a living rhythm when nurtured through intention, transparency, and disciplined nurture. Now, consider how this applies when you face uncertainty about a financial choice. Perhaps an opportunity arises that requires investment or risk. Instead of recoiling, what would happen if you paused to ask, how might this challenge be an invitation to step into greater responsibility without losing my spiritual center? Reframing situations like this crafts a stronger foundation on which to build. I also noticed how conversations around money often carry unspoken biases and fears passed down through generations. Observing my family's attitudes revealed a tangled web of stories about limitation and survival. While those narratives honored their context, clinging to them now only repeated cycles of constraint. Recognizing inherited beliefs as just that, stories, not absolute truths, paved the way to rewrite a new financial script rich with possibility. At its core, this evolution probes what it means to honor the sacredness of resources entrusted to us. The capacity to live faithfully while embracing responsibility challenges us to balance humility with boldness, trust with discernment. It pushes beyond simplistic dichotomies and invites us into a dynamic, lived experience where virtue and vitality coexist. In the quiet moments when I reflected on my progress, a metaphor emerged, a garden where seeds of faith are planted, but those seeds require care, watering, and protection to bloom. Ignoring any part of this cycle leads to barren soil. Similarly, spiritual conviction without pragmatic stewardship is incomplete, just as financial management without grace and purpose can breed emptiness. Ultimately, the move toward flourishing demands intimate conversations with ourselves about values, fears, and hopes. It requires dismantling walls built long ago and opening windows to fresh light and air. My journey reminded me that prosperity's embrace is not reserved for the few lucky or the presumptuous but is accessible to those willing to cultivate courage, clarity, and commitment. As I look ahead, I encourage you to reflect on your own story. Where might responsibility and faith intersect in your life? What new choices become possible when you hold both as essential allies? Through this lens, abundance transcends mere numbers, it becomes a reflection of your willingness to live deliberately and fully. One evening, as twilight draped the city in soft shades of indigo, I found myself seated on a worn wooden bench in an unfamiliar park. The air trembled with the hum of distant traffic, yet an unexpected calm settled within me. In that quiet space, my mind began untangling threads I had long ignored. I questioned how much I had been holding myself hostage, not due to external limits but my own incomplete understanding of what it truly means to embrace abundance. A friend's voice echoed inside me, a reminder that wealth is not merely numbers touching a bank account but a state of alignment between desire, intention, and openness. I acknowledged, for the first time, the ways in which I had rejected prosperity out of discomfort with my perceived unworthiness. This was no longer a shadow lurking on the edge of consciousness but a knot demanding attention. My soul urged me to scrutinize rituals, habits, and even subtle behaviors that, unbeknownst to me, erected walls around my potential. I recalled an episode a few weeks earlier when an unexpected bonus arrived at work. Instead of welcoming it, I felt an odd sense of guilt creeping in. I questioned internally whether I deserved this extra financial blessing, whether I had earned it, or if it would somehow disrupt the balance I had carefully maintained to avoid temptation. Instead of allowing excitement or gratitude, I buried the moment beneath justification and worry. It dawned on me that accepting prosperity required dissolving these barriers of self-reproach and fear. This dynamic revealed a profound paradox. My avoidance emerged from an internalized script telling me that to deserve abundance, one must be flawless or beyond reproach. In reality, such expectations create a prison where progress is stifled by perfectionism's relentless scrutiny. I envisioned a grand symphony where each instrument must not only play but improvise, insisting on silence until every note meets impossible standards kills the music entirely. Similarly, expecting my journey toward prosperity to be without missteps had confined me in hesitation. One afternoons later, I observed the way children approached new experiences, reckless joy mingling with curiosity and willingness to fail. They fell, they got up, they tried again without shame. This observation struck me deeply. I realized that cultivating a mindset of acceptance toward mistakes and imperfect growth would serve as a crucial bridge in my journey. Prosperity isn't a destination reached only by those who get it right on the first try, but a narrative written by perseverance, learning, and self-compassion. Equally striking was how I had compartmentalized financial education, postponing it indefinitely with excuses about not enough time or too complicated. I began intentionally scheduling moments to understand budgeting, investing, and financial planning. Surprisingly, immersing myself in these subjects didn't trigger the dread I'd feared. Instead, it sparked empowerment. It felt as though each concept decoded a cipher that once locked abundance out of reach. The knowledge transformed illusions of scarcity into tools of intentional stewardship. In parallel, I faced a personal conversation with an old family member who expressed skepticism about wealth, recounting hardships endured when resources were lean. Their narrative, born from real struggle, conveyed wisdom but also seeded caution in me, an inherited wariness around money that lingered invisibly as a filter on my perceptions. Recognizing generational patterns allowed me to rewrite the dialogue within, replacing inherited scarcity with an informed embrace of possibility shaped by grace and wisdom. During a weekend retreat that followed, I encountered a spiritual exercise that asked me to visualize how I related to money as if it were a living entity. I pictured it as a guarded fortress, walls thick with doubt and mistrust. Yet behind one gate, rays of welcoming light penetrated, promising new growth but demanding courage to pass. This vision stirred a decision deep within, to meet financial resources with open eyes and heart, cultivating respect and care without fear or denial. It was an invitation to reimagine money as an ally supporting the journey rather than an adversary to withstand. I also discovered the art of microgestures, small but consistent actions signaling to myself that I valued progress. Simple acts such as setting aside a modest amount weekly, celebrating financial milestones no matter how slight, or journaling gratitude for resources at hand gradually reoriented my mindset. These habits accrued momentum, anchoring new neural pathways which gradually softened resistance. I liken it to watering a sapling, tender but patient, trusting it will rise above shadows toward sunlight. A striking breakthrough came unexpectedly at a community dinner when an older woman shared her testimony of transforming her relationship with money by embracing vulnerability. She described the shift from hiding financial struggles out of shame to seeking support openly. Her courage prompted me to confront my own reluctance to disclose areas of difficulty and to reach out for guidance without fear of judgment. The simple act of speaking openly about finances dismantled isolation and kindled connection, another catalyst in the unfolding journey toward prosperity. Now, picture yourself confronted with an opportunity requiring trust, a novel project, an investment, or even just an honest conversation about your dreams. What internal stories shape your response? Could welcoming vulnerability operate as a gateway to new possibilities rather than a risk to be avoided? These questions challenge us to approach abundance not as merely external acquisition but as a layered process involving emotional courage, mindset flexibility, and relational openness. In these discoveries, I recognize that prosperity blossoms when nurtured by authenticity and resilience. It demands a willingness to surface the unseen fears dressed as humility and a readiness to rewrite internal maps that steer us away from the fullness we seek. The path forward stretches beyond technique alone. It calls for embracing our whole selves, shadows and light alike, as we choose growth over comfort and expansion over stagnation. As I wandered through the quiet halls of my own reflections, a subtle shift stirred beneath the surface, a weaving together of insights previously scattered like fallen leaves in autumn's gentle breeze. It was as though disparate threads began to curl and entwine, forming a tapestry far richer and more intricate than I ever anticipated. Within the swirling patterns, I sensed a convergence not only of understanding but of possibility, drawing me closer to a horizon that had eluded clear sight until now. There is a particular moment I recall vividly, standing at the edge of a quiet lake at dawn, the water smooth as glass, reflecting the awakening sky. The stillness held a kind of enigmatic promise, inviting me to peer beneath its surface. In that mirrored silence, layers of resistance, hope, hesitation, and courage seemed to flow together in a gentle undercurrent. It was not about unraveling or dissecting each wave but surrendering to their collective motion, a subtle dance of forces shaping the contours of my inner landscape. In many ways, the journey through this labyrinth of thought has resembled a long, winding corridor lined with countless doors, some heavy and locked, others ajar but guarded with shadows. I found myself lingering at thresholds, uncertain whether to proceed forward or retreat into familiar rooms where comfort and limitation both resided. Yet with each tentative step, the fog began to thin, revealing spaces where light leaked through even the smallest cracks, signaling invitations I could no longer ignore. More than once, I caught myself caught in an invisible tug of war, the desire to uphold cherished ideals, coupled with a paradoxical sense of confinement imposed by unwitting assumptions. It reminded me of a traveler trying to navigate a landscape illuminated by flickering lanterns. Every flicker cast new shapes and sometimes false outlines, making me question the solidity of what I thought I knew. Yet the traveler does not lose heart. Instead, they learn to appreciate that these imperfect lights bring their own wisdom, urging cautious advancement. In moments when doubt tightened its grip, I noticed a deep breath would loosen the strands of tension just enough to glimpse emerging clarity. Like an intricate symphony, each tone matters, the highs bursting with aspiration, the lows with hesitation confessing truths I dared not face before. It became clear that within this complex harmony, none of the notes stand alone, rather, they rely on one another to create the fullness of the composition. This awareness compelled me to embrace an ethos of patience and curiosity. There's a gentle power in allowing our internal stories to unfurl naturally, revealing hidden spaces that require care and understanding, not forceful correction. I started to sense that true transformation thrives not on swift upheaval but on subtle shifts accumulating over time, much like a river carving canyons imperceptibly, shaping landscapes through persistent flow. The path forward didn't demand immediate leaps but a steady willingness to engage with discomfort, uncertainty, and evolving beliefs. It persuaded me to view perceived setbacks not as failures, but as integral beats in a larger rhythm, each one inviting reflection, adjustment, and renewed intent. This approach nurtured an inner resilience, less about bracing for impact and more about learning how to bend with life's unpredictable currents. Reflecting on this journey so far, I feel the contours of a new perspective gently emerging, one infused with deeper compassion for my own struggles, tempered by a resolute openness to growth. It's a landscape where courage no longer means the absence of fear but the choice to move forward alongside it. An evolving mosaic where past hesitations meld into fertile ground for unexpected blossoms. Within this space, I am learning to recognize abundance not solely as external gain, but as an embodied experience tethered to clarity, choice, and authentic presence. I find myself drawn to the metaphor of a garden in midwinter, barren yet brimming with silent potential. Beneath dormant branches lie roots gathering strength, nourished by unseen currents. The promise of spring lingers, pregnant with life, awaiting readiness to bloom. This metaphor hums softly as both comfort and call to action in an unfolding story still in motion. As you and I stand at this juncture, feel into the texture of your own unfolding narrative. Notice the energies weaving through your heart and mind, hesitation mingling with hope, questions glowing alongside quiet resolve. The space between what is and what waits holds a sacred invitation, one that asks not for perfect understanding but for wholehearted engagement. It beckons us toward a horizon shimmering with possibilities shaped by all we have encountered, challenged, and cherished. This moment bristles with the tension of what awaits just beyond visibility. We are not strangers here but companions navigating the passage through shadow and light, learning to trust the journey as much as the destination. With every breath, step, and thought, we move closer to embracing the vastness poised just beyond the veil. Sometimes, the most profound truths arrive not in triumphant moments but in quiet realizations that ripple beneath the surface of our daily lives. I recall a late afternoon when, alone in my study, the sky outside painted with hues of fading sunlight, a whisper of clarity unfurled like a gentle breeze shifting the curtains. It wasn't a flash of revelation but an intimate invitation to question how I shaped my own relationship with abundance, and how often I unwittingly placed invisible barriers before the very blessings I sought. In those moments, I saw that embracing prosperity demands more than external effort or fervent prayers. It calls for a tender reckoning with the narratives we carry about worthiness, responsibility, and trust. It dawned on me that abundance flourishes not when chased or resisted but when welcomed with conscious openness and humility, as a natural extension of our gifts and purpose. This realization redefined my perspective completely, uplifting what once seemed unreachable into the realm of possibility. There was a conversation etched in my memory, a simple exchange that illuminated much. A friend leaned in, voice steady, and shared how she had once equated success with sacrifice, believing that to receive meant relinquishing dignity or grace. Her struggle mirrored my own shadows until a shift arrived, a choice to honor desire without shame, to steward resources wisely while allowing joy and growth to coexist. Her words sparked a shift in me, unlocking an internal space where faith and action could harmonize, painting a richer, more generous portrait of what it means to thrive. Navigating this transformation embraced vulnerability as an unexpected ally. When I first opened myself up to admit uncertainties about money management, I feared judgment or failure, but instead encountered grace and acceptance. It became clear that true strength resides not in hiding doubts but in meeting them honestly, creating fertile ground for empowerment. This emotional honesty intertwined with practical intent ushered in a new rhythm, blending hope with accountability. The metaphor of planting resonates deeply, how a seed requires not just rich soil, but patience, care, and the courage to withstand storms. In nurturing abundance, I realized I must cultivate internal harmony, aligning belief, mindset, and deliberate choices. It isn't a linear climb but a dance with complexities, learning when to push forward, when to rest, and how to honor each season of growth. Joy and struggle weave intricately, both essential textures in a story unfolding uniquely and profoundly. I think of an evening walk I took beneath a sky scattered with stars, each flickering light a symbol of possibility shimmering beyond apparent limits. Alone with my breath and the night's stillness, I asked, what if abundance is already within reach, waiting only for my readiness to receive it fully? A quiet response arose, not as a voice but a feeling of spaciousness around my heart, encouraging me to shed old fears and step into a fuller expression of my purpose. This invitation extends beyond me. I sense it as a universal call. We all carry fragile, resistant parts, echoes of past lessons that shaped how we view ourselves, our dreams, and what we believe we deserve. Yet these fragments, when gently gathered and honored, reveal keys to unlocking profound transformation. The courage to rewrite internal scripts, to picture possibility in new colors, births a freedom that cultivates resilience and grace amid uncertainty. I hold this awareness close, knowing that abundance is not a destination fixed by external measures but a living expression cultivated within. It grows in moments when we choose intention over inertia, openness over fear, and compassion over harsh judgment of ourselves. By acknowledging where hidden resistances linger, and inviting them into compassionate light, we begin rewiring the narrative, inviting a flow that supports and sustains us. In quiet reflection, I offer this truth. The pathway to flourishing is paved not only by faith or effort but by wholehearted embrace of the whole self, our vulnerabilities, hopes, and evolving understandings. Each step forward reaffirms our capacity to claim the fullness of life meant for us, weaving together spirit and practical wisdom into a vibrant tapestry. The applause may come softly, but within it echoes a profound triumph, the awakening to our own readiness, welcoming abundance as the birthright it has always been. So, as I continue walking this unfolding path, I invite you to listen deeply, to the subtle whispers within and the stirrings of possibility just beyond sight. What walls around your heart ask to be gently lowered? Where might courage flourish when called with kindness? Together, we navigate this landscape not as distant travelers, but as companions discovering how openness can transform scarcity into a flourishing garden, inviting us all to step fully into the light.